I'd like to start by thanking the grace of heaven, virtues of masters, grand predecessor, transmitters, lecturers, and all of you for giving me this opportunity to share this class today, the 10 admonitory sermons from God to her children, part 4. And this is a continuation from Transmitter Ray's class. Okay, and since it's been a little while since the last class on this topic, I wanted to just share a little bit more background and an introduction again. So in the introduction of this book, it says, "There is the mother who bestowed upon us our bright true nature. We call her Lamu. And Lamu is looking forward to our return to her day and night, just like all mothers look forward to the return of their children." Okay, so being in this earthly world, most humans, we only know of the mother who gave us our physical bodies, while the mother of our true nature is kind of unknown to us. So it's kind of saying that, we're lost in confusion, not knowing that we should cultivate our true nature to return to the origin. And by origin, it means our true home or our absolute heaven or permanent heaven. And we know that, when we grow up and even as adults, our mothers and fathers, they worry about us all the time, right? Every time we go out, they tell us to be careful or they ask what time we're going to be home. So our parents are always looking forward to us coming home. Or if we've moved out, then, they're always looking forward to us visiting them. So it's really the same thing. Our other mother, God, or we can call her Lamu, our heavenly mother, she's waiting with bated breath, just worried for all of her children to return home. So God also says that heaven is deserted and it stands empty because she has sent all the immortals and saints and Buddhas to earth to save all of God's children. So she sighs for all of her children who are lost in their dreams of fortune and fame, and she worries for all of us. Thus, she is now personally descending to, restore and save this mortal world. So we know it's really rare and special for God to come visit, either through a medium or, we call it 3 talents. So it just shows how urgent it is for God to come and decide to come down herself. Okay, so God, or we can say Lamu, came to do a sand writing on August 7th, 1941, and gave holy teachings called the 10 admonitory sermons from God to her children. Okay, so admonitory means a message of warning. So these holy teachings elaborate on the reason why God sent all of her children to this world and talks about the last salvation of the 3 realms. And also explains why tests and trials are given to cultivators, and additionally also testifies to the preciousness of receiving Tao. It also talks about and teaches the recipe for accumulating merits and cultivating virtues, and how to return to our origin successfully, right? So God is our loving heavenly mother who's afraid that we won't return home. So she's delivered this letter to awaken her children, all of us. Now, when God came to earth for the sand writing, she was escorted by all the Buddhas, right? So they each came, stated their names and their messages for us. And some of the Buddhas, this included the 8 immortals, chief examiner of the 3 realms, so many bodhisattvas, even the thunder marshal, the Buddha of the underworld, Prophet Muhammad, Jesus Christ, and Sakyamuni Buddha, and so many more, including our own holy teacher, who wrote, "I'm very anxious and worried for being unable to fulfill God's order in time." He says, "All sentient beings are still drifting in the waves, and that makes me sorrowful and cry. For I see the time has come. How will I answer to Lamu?" And he says, "I am your holy teacher, Nenping Jigong, and I have waited on Lamu to descend to the temple, and I have paid obeisance to Lamu, and then I greet all my disciples." And he says, "When Lamu writes, we must all show our utmost sincerity. Time is very critical. We must work diligently to attain great merits and high achievements as soon as possible." He says, "Holding our hands, together we shall return home and show our respect to Lamu. This is all that I have been expecting for all of us to accomplish. So we're really lucky that we have our holy teacher to support us. So then Lamu says, I am Lamu, God, Lord of all beings, leading all Buddhas. I come to meet my children. So stand firm, my children, and listen carefully to my concerns. He says, I, Lamu, am going to admonish you now to warn my children who have gone astray. Okay, so again, admonish means to give a warning, some sort of message of warning. So today's class, we're focusing on the fourth admonitory sermon from Lamu. And as we can see, there's 10. So the main topic of this fourth sermon is to distinguish truth from falsehood, to transcend the abyss of bitterness. Meaning we need to be awakened to what is true versus not true. Right? Only by being able to recognize the truth and see through the falsehoods, only then can we transcend the sea of suffering. Okay, so then God says, truth and falsehood, falsehood and truth. Within the true, there is false. Within the false, there is truth. It's truly difficult to distinguish what is real and what is false. Okay, so this phrase means that within truth, there's truth, and within falsehood, there's falsehood. So it implies that what appears to be true may not truly be true, and what appears to be false might not really be false either. Right? So there's many meanings of the word true, but here it's really talking about that true self, that Buddha nature. Okay? So we know that there are both false selves and true selves. And so it says, if an ordinary person relies on the 5 skandhas, which are the form and image, or sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness, and the 6 sense roots, right? We know the 6 sense roots. If we rely on those to be our master, then that is the false self. But our physical body and that mind is all temporary. Okay? So we know that one day we have to return our physical bodies back to the earth. Therefore, if it's temporary, then it's false or it's an illusion. While in contrast, the true self, the Buddha nature, that is the actual true self. That is the only thing that does not fade. It's everlasting no matter any conditions, and that is what is actually real or true. So then God says, if one can fully comprehend the truths and illusions of this world and discard the false to seek the truth, one can transcend the suffering of the mundane world. Okay? So we know in the 4 noble truths, it talks about suffering. Right? In this mundane world, suffering is inevitable. So we know that there's birth, old age, sickness, and death, and all of these things we will experience, and that is suffering. It also says any feelings of sadness, anger, jealousy, worry, anxiety, fear, and despair, that is all forms of suffering. Okay? Separation from our loved ones is also suffering. Association with those we can't stand is also suffering. Desire, attachment, and clinging to the 5 skandhas is also suffering. Okay? So only when we can see through the illusions and falsehoods and really grasp the truth, then we can transcend all of this suffering. And until then, we're kind of stuck in this cycle of suffering, and many of us don't even realize it. It says, those who can see through truth and falsehood should quickly establish merit and virtue, widely promote and spread the true principles, guide sentient beings to return to their origin and recognize their true nature, and together seek this true heavenly Tao. So this is really saying, we want to awaken ourselves and truly cultivate while we can. Then we need to spread the Tao principles far and wide quickly to all other sentient beings. So why? Well, because all sentient beings are our brothers and sisters. So we want to awaken ourselves and then help others awaken too, so that we can all return back to our Heavenly Mother together one day. And in the 4th admonitory sermon, what is most important for all God's children to be admonished about is the need to truly cultivate with understanding and principle, consistently and persistently. It says, the world is a sea of suffering, and all sentient beings are drifting and struggling in its turbulent waves. So this is talking about how most people are being pushed and pulled by these waves, which are really just our daily lives, right? The emotions, the attachments, our karma, even we can say our delusion, and we know the three poisons: greed, anger, and stubbornness. So most people don't have a true direction or even firm footing. So they have no choice but to let these turbulent waves control them and push them around. But, we are all cultivators, so we kind of have been a little bit more awakened. We understand there is a bigger picture, and we don't have to let those things control us, right? We can use our Buddha nature to control those things instead. So we just have to awaken, see through the false, see through the illusions. Don't let these waves pull us and control us. And people toil from dawn to dusk, constantly busy for the sake of their livelihood and families, running around everywhere, just like cattle roaming aimlessly in the wild, only to eventually head toward the slaughterhouse. So this is the true depiction of human life. Okay, so the grand predecessor said something similar, like, we don't just come to this world just to get married, just to have 2 kids, and then die and leave, right? We need to give our lives true meaning, true purpose. And what greater purpose than to return to permanent heaven, absolute heaven, and help others do the same. So recently we had an older man receive Tao here in Texas, and he said for a very long time he had been questioning his life. He said he felt like he was searching for something, looking for meaning in this world, and he was so happy when he found the Tao because that was the direction or the purpose he was searching for so long for. Meanwhile, many of us just sort of, happened upon the Tao. We don't even realize how fortunate we are. So as for everyone else who hasn't had that fortunate time yet, didn't have the affinity to find the Tao yet, they really are just toiling away each day without realizing it. And God says, human life in this world is like the mayfly, born in the morning and dead by evening, fleeting and short-lived. Who can avoid the judgment of Yama, the king of hell? So we know adult mayflies, like in this picture, they have a very short lifespan. They typically last a few hours to a few days. So us humans, we can maybe make it 80 to 100 years, and that can seem like a long time. But really, in the grand scheme of things, especially in the eyes of the Buddhas, 80 years is nothing. We're basically mayflies to them too. So when our time comes, everything we do will be judged by Yama, the king of the underworld, to see if we cultivated and did good things and if it outweighs the lifetimes of bad things we may have done. So we want to do as much good while we can right now, while we have somewhat awakened and have this opportunity. And hopefully what we do is enough. So it would be a sorrow if a human's decades of life were just a process of birth, aging, sickness, and death. All the experiences of life, the countless worldly affairs, are like the dew on flowers or the frost on grass, disappearing with the rising sun, fleeting in an instant. So some spend their days chasing fame and fortune, seeking wealth and status, drifting through the sea of suffering that is life and death without ever realizing it. They grow attached to beautiful wives and cherish their cute, beloved children. Yet, in the end, life and death separate them all. Is it not all just an empty illusion, like a long dream? So God is telling us that everything in this world is not permanent. And anything that is not permanent is kind of an illusion, right? It's a falsehood. So we all have to leave this earth the same way we came into it, by ourselves. So we just have to remember that. And this mundane world is miserable, and what human beings suffer is beyond words. My children are entangled in all kinds of emotions, feelings, and desires. So this world, it may not actually feel miserable, especially when we're young, right? We think, oh, we're young, we're healthy, things are so much fun. But hopefully as we cultivate and awaken, we can start to see the real truth, which is that honestly, we are all suffering, right? Maybe at work or even at temple, there's gossip, there's criticisms, or maybe at home, our family life is not harmonious, it's tough. So in the big picture, that's really not that bad, but that is still a form of suffering too, okay? And that's not even talking about third world countries and war zones, so we can't even imagine how much suffering is happening there, okay? And although we are able to purchase vast land and harvest a large amount of food, the daily food that we need for ourselves is actually so limited. So if we think about what we really need, what we really use, okay? Humans, we tend to be very gluttonous, right? Our eyes are always hungrier than our stomachs. But if we think about it, we can only eat so much each day. So no matter how much food we produce, how much we own or buy, our body only needs a small amount to stay healthy and full. So we can't possibly eat more than a few meals a day. And trying to consume more won't actually bring us any additional happiness or additional satisfaction. If we really think about it, it's more likely to cause us pain, stomach aches. So while having abundance is a blessing, it's important to stay grounded and not forget how little we truly need to live each day very comfortably. And so recently I heard Lecturer Liu say that a couple years ago he saw in the news there were these two sisters in Japan. They were 61 and 64. And one day the utility company went out to collect their debt from the two sisters. And that's how the two sisters were finally found. They had actually starved to death. And when they died, they only had the equivalent to $1 to their name. So Lecturer Liu reminds us that when we have the ability to please consider helping others, right? There's so much suffering in the world. If we can help even a little bit, that could really change someone's life potentially. And one day, if we're ever struggling, we are in need as well. Others may help us too. Okay, so God says, although we are able to build a huge, grand house, what we sleep on is a bed. It's impossible for our body to cover two beds at the same time. Okay, so even if we have all the money and the ability to build a massive, beautiful mansion with so many rooms, high ceilings, expensive decorations, at the end of the day, we can only sleep on one bed, right? We don't need 10 beds. So no matter how big our house is, our body just needs one little place to rest. We can't lie on two beds at once. We don't need 10 bedrooms to sleep peacefully. This just shows that beyond a certain point, more space, more luxury doesn't actually improve our basic needs. It just becomes all extra. So the comfort we get from one warm, clean bed is the same whether it's in a palace or just a small room. So it's kind of important to remember that, what we truly need and not get too caught up chasing more. And although our dress is all luxurious or satin, it is merely to shield from the cold and the heat, to guard against wind and frost. Okay, so we tend to spend a lot of money on clothes and shoes, maybe name brand things. And even though our clothes might be fancy, made of expensive material, they're really just for keeping us warm when it's cold and keep us cool when it's hot. Okay, so they're meant to protect us from the wind, the bad weather. And no matter how beautiful or expensive these clothes look, they still have the same basic job, right? To cover and protect our body. That is their job. So while it might feel special or, exciting to wear something luxurious, at the end of the day, it's still just clothing doing a simple job, right? We don't want to become obsessed and end up owning like 500 pairs of shoes. That would be quite excessive, right? And although we have accumulated money and wealth as high as mountains, how can we bring even a single cent with us when we pass away? So we spend so much time and energy to pursue wealth, but what it boils down to, what we truly need, we just need a roof over our heads. We just need some clothes that keep us warm, some food to sustain us, right? So consider how much we waste every single day. So we should try our best to cut back, not become obsessed with material things. If we don't truly need it, don't waste our energy and time chasing it. We can't take any of that with us when we leave this world anyway. And, something else to ask ourselves, do these material things really bring us true happiness? Sometimes we might feel, temporary joy in the moment, but that's never going to give us lasting, true happiness. And although we enjoy eating the meat and seafood at a banquet, all these dishes came from killing these creatures. This bad karma is difficult to be counted and cannot be tolerated by the heavenly law. Okay, so we have to remember that everything we do has consequences, whether good or bad, but especially since we know the foundation of cultivating Tao is not inflicting pain or suffering on other sentient beings, right? So if we have not started considering a plant-based diet, we really want to try to start thinking about it and start cutting back on meat and animal products as soon as we can, right? We don't want to keep accumulating bad karma, especially when we don't know if we have enough good deeds to offset our bad ones. But no matter what, we know we're going to have to pay back anything we owe at some point. That is the universal law of cause and effect. And although we enjoy daily pleasures, feeling relaxed and content, 100 years pass like a dream. Although we have a beautiful wife and beautiful children, when death approaches, we still have to part ways. How sorrowful. So we are all suffering. We may not even realize it. We're trapped by our emotions, our sixth sense roots. And, our eyes see something we like, we hear something we might dislike, or, we taste something that tastes good. And it pulls us further into these falsehoods, these illusions. So we truly, can become lost and confused very easily. And if we think about it, maybe we get everything we want or we thought we want in this lifetime in terms of, a wonderful family, plenty of money, a mansion, nice cars, etc. But at the end of the day, we're still stuck in the cycle of suffering. And we're going to have to leave behind all of those temporary falsehood things that we may have gained, right? But it's all temporary. And then God says, when I, Lamu, see this chaotic and sinful earthly world, I always sigh, and teardrops fall like rain. I hope my children's true nature will not get lost and go astray due to temptations. This mundane world is like a playground of illusions. Okay? So again, sometimes this mundane world can be fun, especially when we're young. We don't have all the pains of getting older yet. But if we're not careful, we can get trapped or tricked by this playground and all the false illusions around us very easily. So we need to be cautious and vigilant, right? So we should go to temple a lot so that we can kind of have these continuous reminders that we can keep in mind our priorities and our purpose. The roles of grandparents, parents, children, and grandchildren are but a congregation of affinities and karma. Okay, so how do we end up with each of our families? All of that is because of our karma. It's determined by our karma. Now, it could be good karma that brings our families together, but in some cases, it could also be bad karma that brought us together. So some children are born into families to pay back their parents, or it could be that they are meant to bring hardship to their parents. There are a lot of stories of those as well. It's from past lifetimes of affinities and karma together. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We are with our family members now in this lifetime. We can't change our family members. So be grateful that we have a chance to play out the rest of our karmic affinity together. And remember, we have that power where we can turn whatever bad karma we may have with each other into good karma. We just have to change our mindset. Think all karma with our family members is good karma, and slowly our fates will improve. Now, if we already have great affinity and great relationships with our family already, then that's fantastic. That's wonderful. We just have to cherish that. Okay? If one can awaken and see the truth and cultivate as a whole family and accumulate merit and virtue, then together return to the heavenly home, the origin. So God says it's a family's honor to cultivate true Tao in this life, and it is also an auspicious sign of good luck and fortune and blessings. When all family members accumulate enough merit and virtue, they all can go back to heaven and get together there. So Buddha have said that before. We don't want to return to heaven just by ourselves, right? We want our whole family, all of our loved ones and friends to be able to be there too. So we want to do what we can to bring them to the temple as well, so that they can cultivate themselves and also awaken. And hopefully one day we can all be reunited in heaven. That would be the perfect world, right? And God says this wondrous affinity and opportunity has never been revealed before. Unfortunately, humans are foolish and stubborn, remain lost in illusion, unaware that life is but a dream. This is really regrettable. So the Tao was rather difficult to encounter previously, right? Past generations. So we're really lucky that we were born at a time where it's readily available if we have the affinity to encounter it. So we can't be foolish and stubborn or, ignorant to the truth. We just have to cherish this opportunity, cultivate ourselves while we have this chance, right? If we let this opportunity pass us by, we're definitely going to regret it one day. And by that time, it'll be too late to take it back or change course. So people who crave for fame and power may reach the highest ranks and yet still desire more. Those who pursue wealth may amass a fortune, yet their hearts remain unsatisfied still. Okay, so when we're younger, we think, we can't wait to make money, can't wait to make big bucks one day. Then maybe after we start working, we think, oh my gosh, when am I going to get that raise? And then maybe we do get that raise that we were coveting. But then a few years later after that, we think, okay, when am I going to get another promotion, another raise, right? Maybe we feel like we deserve it. And it becomes a never-ending cycle of feeling like we never have enough, right? It's never enough. I want more, and more. But God says those people, they keep on craving, keep on clinging, never stopping to reflect. They forgot the path of life and death until at last they stand before King Yama, ruler of the underworld. Okay, so us humans, we become so focused on just what's in front of us, our jobs, our families, our current life. But how often are we truly reflecting on ourselves and actively trying to cultivate ourselves? We don't want to become like ordinary people who forgot where we came from and all we care about are our own desires, right? That's not good. We want to cultivate and keep improving day by day, right? We want to keep making progress, not become stagnant and stuck in the same spot, or even worse, regress. Okay, so we don't want to regret not doing everything we could while we had this chance. By the time we meet Yama, king of the underworld, that means it's too late to change our fates then. So if one can awaken early and cultivate the true heavenly nature, one will ascend. If one fails to awaken and remains lost in deluded thoughts, one falls into the hell of despair. So which one are we going to choose? Right? It's up to each of us. Nobody can pull us in either direction. Our path is completely determined by ourselves and our choices. Okay? So no one can force us to do bad things. No one can force us to do good things either. So it's really up to each of us to be motivated to go the right path. Okay? This vast divide splits into two paths based on a single thought. If in just one moment the mind goes astray, eternal sorrow follows. Right? So we know confusion or enlightenment, that makes a great difference. God says the difference lies in our one thought. It's decided by us and our choices. Okay? So a deviant thought, a wrong choice, that's going to bring suffering and misery. So we know our thoughts are very powerful. Something that Lecturer Liu from the Buddha Nature Study class often says is, be careful of our thoughts because thoughts lead to actions. Be careful of our actions because actions lead to habits. Be careful of our habits because habits become our character. And be careful of our character because our character is what determines our fate. And it also starts just from a single thought, right? So we want to make sure that we are always in control of our mind, of our thoughts. We don't want to let our minds wander off too much, get too crazy. If we start to feel like it's starting to wander, quickly reverse course and correct it, right? Turn any negative thoughts into positive ones. Okay, so the bitterness in the underworld is hard to express in words. Before the mirror of karma, with just one glance, all sins are fully exposed. So there's no way to escape when we stand in front of this mirror of karma. It reflects all the good and the bad deeds that we have done. Okay, so we can't really even imagine how terrifying the underworld really is, right? But we know when we leave this world, we're going to be shown this mirror of karma. And when we look into it, everything we've ever done, every wrong choice, every cruel word, every selfish action is going to show clearly. There's no way to hide from it. So this mirror, it doesn't skew things. It doesn't show any bias. It just shows the truth exactly as it is, exactly what we did. And that can be very painful to just stand there, be forced to face everything that we've done and who we really are at our very core, right? We really want to make sure we're cultivating sincerely, not just on the surface and pretending to do it. If one does good, it's still considered fine. One enjoys blessings in the next life. But when those blessings run out, one must still fall. How can it last forever? So it's saying, it would be all right if we've done something good in this life, maybe we can enjoy some blessings in the next life. And that's a good thing. But when we've enjoyed or used up all of those blessings, there still comes a time when we use it all up and we're going to fall into the underworld. Therefore, pursuing blessings only is really not the long-term way. It's not a long-term solution. So sooner or later, if we haven't truly changed or truly cultivated ourselves, we're going to have to face the consequences. Okay? So real peace or real enlightenment comes not just from doing good deeds, just for rewards, just for merits, but true peace, true enlightenment comes from like a real deep understanding, truly, sincerely transforming ourselves at a deeper, true, sincere level. Okay, so again, some people might look like they're really cultivating, but are we really cultivating internally? Only we can answer that ourselves, right? But if we are just doing it for show, one day that's going to come to light, and that's not what we're looking to do. We want to be truly improving ourselves at our core. If one commits evil, there's no way to justify it. Words and explanations cannot defend. The punishment will follow the sin, and one must bear it alone. Okay, so if we've sinned heavily while we're, humans or alive, we have nothing we can say and plead with when we stand in front of the mirror of karma. When that happens, we just have to accept our punishment because of our sin, and nobody can take our place for us, right? We are ultimately responsible for every choice and thought we make ourselves. Okay, so this truly shows that even when criminals think, maybe they got away with something just because they weren't caught by the police or, sentenced by a judge, they cannot truly escape their sins. Their punishment is still lurking in the shadows, waiting. Okay, so sometimes we may wonder why good things happen to bad people. It just means that those people had some blessings or fortune from the past that they are using up right now. But sooner or later, that truth of what they really did, who they are at their core, it's going to surface and their karma is coming. So there's no escaping it. And again, that is the universal law of cause and effect. Okay. So God says it's really sad and scary to think about hell and the punishments that await. So God tells us the punishments in hell include something called the mountain of knives, the boiling oil pot, body dismembering saw, and body grinding iron pestle, and all punishments vary in form. Moreover, there are fierce dogs to drink the criminal's blood, and these things are all too hard for us to imagine as human beings. So there's actually a book called, I think, like Journey to the Underworld, where they describe hell in more detail. So we really just can't imagine how much torment and how painful the punishments are in hell, how terrifying it must be, right? And God says there are also many men, women, old and young, falling down the fully occupied 18-story hell from the knighthood bridge. And says the 18 levels of hell are truly heart-wrenching to behold. So this knighthood bridge is what, I guess, spirits cross to reach the next phase. Maybe it's reincarnation or punishment, right? So God tells us that hell has 18 stories or chambers, and it's completely full. So that's really sad. And we know that these 18 levels are ruled by Yama. And each story or each chamber is reserved for a specific type of sin. And the more serious the sin, the deeper or more severe the level is. And I think I remember, if I remember correctly, that since this was in 1941, I think since then there might have been a different sandwriting or something where Buddha's told us that it might actually be more than 18 levels now at this point. So that's pretty scary. And something that I think about often is, how Ksitigarbha Buddha, who made the vow to not be recognized as a Buddha until all the souls in hell were saved. And so if all the levels of hell are completely full, like God says, with, more souls showing up every single day, that is such a hard vow for anyone to make, right? That's not something normal people would ever be willing to undertake, right? To stake our Buddhahood on the billions of souls who might have done so much evil. Yet Buddhas don't even blink twice and are willing to sacrifice themselves, try to save all of them. And to me, that is truly touching and why they were able to become Buddhas. So we need to strive to be more and more like that, more open-hearted. So God says, speaking of the suffering, it's hard to go on. I can't help but let my tears fall, soaking my chest. So we can see how compassionate and kind God is, and God's just so sad to think about all of God's children, especially those in hell, that are all suffering, right? And we on this earth are also all suffering. So as a mother, it must be really hard and painful to watch this. God says one misstep leads to eternal regret. Truly it is so. Losing a human life, one falls into the lower realms, unable to return to the immortal home. So our Heavenly Mother, our God's heart breaks every time we take a misstep or we sin, whether by accident, on purpose, whatever it is, it breaks her heart. Now, all those souls in hell also break her heart. She's trying so hard to guide us, protect us from that same fate as those in hell. So, once we sin once, it becomes kind of easier or more comfortable to continue making the same mistakes. It becomes a habit, right? Now, when that happens, it's going to be really hard to return to permanent heaven, absolute heaven. So if we kind of look at animals and insects, how long do we think it's going to take them, right? How many lifetimes to finish their punishment and be reborn finally as a human again? And then when they are possibly human again, how hard is it going to be to remember to do good things, to not do bad things, right? So we can really see how hard this opportunity we have is to come by. Okay. So God says, listen to mother's advice, cultivate the heavenly Tao well with a refreshed spirit. Establish a firm resolve with aspirations soaring to the heavens and a heart as strong as diamond. So we really need to motivate ourselves, do what it takes to refresh ourselves, refresh our spirit, our will, make a big aspiration, right? When we can do that, we have to make sure we hold firmly to it. We have to be diligent and persevere through any challenges and never forget or let go of that aspiration. Okay, so that's kind of why I always say, remember to go to temple. We just never know what Tao principle we're going to hear that kind of triggers us to remember our aspiration or, trigger us to motivate ourselves. Now, if we don't go often, it's really easy to grow colder and colder from our true mission and kind of get sucked back into this playground of illusions and falsehoods, our everyday life around us. So we don't want to let that be us or our family and friends. Always remember what our purpose and our direction is. And if we constantly have these reminders around us, it's easier to kind of hold to it. If we go too far from it, then it's easy to get lost again in all of these illusions. God says our ancestors are trapped in a cycle of reincarnation, yearning day and night, hoping that we will perform merits and accumulate virtues to help them transcend the vast sea of suffering. So we may not think much of going to temple, right, listening to classes, or sweeping at temple, helping out a temple, whatever it is, whatever good deeds we might do. We might not think much about it. But every time we do so, we are helping so many souls, our own ancestors, just by showing up and trying, putting in a little bit of effort. So really, we don't want to just do it for ourselves. Do it for all the countless souls who are depending on each of us because they aren't able to do it for themselves any longer, right? It's not just about us. And a single mistaken thought leading to a fall may not seem significant, but it brings sorrow to our ancestors who weep bitterly in the afterlife. Suffering under the weight of XinMin mountain for 60,000 years, how agonizing it is, awaiting to board the next universal salvation ferry. Okay? So one wrong thought, just a small mistake, might not seem like a big deal at the time, but even a single moment of carelessness can set off, like a butterfly effect, a chain of consequences beyond what we can even see or even comprehend. So if our bad thoughts, our bad deeds only brought ourselves down, that would be kind of bad and kind of be a shame, but then at least we're only affecting ourselves. But the truth is that everything we do, everything we say or even think can affect our ancestors, right? It brings sadness to our ancestors who watch from the afterlife with this heavy heart, watching us misstep. So they cry for us. They hope that we'll find our way back. So they likely did not have the opportunity to receive Tao like we do, right? Remember, in the past, Tao was not readily available like it is today. So some of them may have been suffering punishments and, paying back for whatever they might have done, possibly being stuck under a mountain for a long time, whatever the punishment might be. So all of our ancestors are waiting for their chance to possibly be reborn during the next cycle, a time when the universal salvation mission in Tao is available to them. But until then, which, we already know, that opportunity is really hard to come by. Until then, they're counting on each of us, their descendants, to accumulate merits so that they can benefit even a little bit as well. So even if we are lucky enough to be in the next period of universal salvation, it is not assured that we can be reincarnated as a human to meet with a heavenly mandated enlightening teacher and even receive the great Tao. Thus, it's better to seize the present opportunity and cultivate to go back to heaven, awaken from our delusion, and follow Holy Mother back to the heavenly home. So some people might think, oh, well, there's always next time. I'll do better next time. I'll cultivate my next life. But there are just no guarantees what period we're even going to be reborn. If somehow we're lucky enough to be born during a period of universal salvation and Tao somehow is available, are we even sure that we'll even be human, right? Are we sure we're going to encounter someone with heaven's true mandate? Are we sure we're going to be wise enough to say yes if someone asks us to receive Tao? So that is a lot of uncertainties and a lot of risk. Whereas right now, it would just be better to take this current lifetime, this current opportunity we have, just hurry up and cultivate, right? Listen to God's advice, God's warnings. Make sure we are truly awake. Don't get lost in this playground of illusions, right? So then God says, now I stop writing this revelation. The holy medium can take a break and I will come back later. So end our idle thoughts, discipline our mind, reflect deeply, and realize what I said thoroughly. Okay. So that's kind of the end of the fourth part, the fourth sermon. And sometimes we hear all these Tao principles, and they can kind of go in one ear and out the other sometimes, but we really want to marinate in it and reflect on what we are listening to and truly just hear it, right? Then we want to embody it and manifest it in our daily lives. So something Lecturer Xu likes to say to our Tao members is to just pick a Buddha, pick a Bodhisattva, an immortal, a saint, whoever you really admire. Then just try to emulate them and be like them. Okay, so we have this chance in this lifetime. Make sure we cherish it and don't waste it. Practice a little bit each day and it won't feel so overwhelming. Remember that everything we do affects not just ourselves, but our ancestors are counting on us. And also future generations as well, right? So now we know what's true, which is our Buddha nature, and we know what's false, all the temporary things around us. Even our bodies and our mind are false, right? Those are illusions. Remind ourselves to keep cultivating, to reveal our Buddha nature, to manifest it. Let our Buddha nature be our master and our guide every single day. It's never going to steer us wrong. Okay? When we can do that, we will already be Buddhas. So let's not give up this chance to attain Buddhahood. Make sure we cultivate and achieve in this one lifetime while we still can. Okay? So thank you. That concludes today's class. If I said anything wrong, I ask heaven for forgiveness and for transmitters and lecturers to please correct me. Thank you.